Hey guys, it's Carnifex with another Nerd This video on Shadow of War Mobile. Quick shout out, I won't mention the name or anything, but I got a really encouraging email from someone recently. I'd kind of been dragging my feet a little bit after getting back from the holidays and everything. But yeah, I just got a really encouraging email from them and just saying like their guild was like using the sheets and everything. And so you know who you are. Thank you. And you can pass that along to your guys. So today we are going to be going over my rankings for every class with the co-op arena now available. So I'll go into a little bit of detail of like why you can see here I've broken it down into three different categories. The second I don't think is going to apply to many people unless you are someone who just like somehow has the time to, because obviously if you run the scenarios on auto, you get to collect experience. And so there is an advantage to doing it. Obviously, it just takes a crap ton more time than clicking like 10 times raid, right? So for the individuals who are planning on doing that, you can obviously benefit a lot from having certain characters do that. You can, depending on how difficult the scenario is, because if the scenario is super easy, then it kind of doesn't matter what their abilities are, because they're just, it matters. The secondary ability is all that matters, because you probably won't even have more than one character get their primary ability fueled up anyways, if they do have like an AoE that works really well for just clearing stuff fast. And then clearing scenarios. Now this is kind of like first time clearing stuff. Who's going to be a character that can whose kit, whose stats, whose all that stuff is going to help you possibly even clear stuff you shouldn't be able to clear yet. Like you're kind of going above level, above gear, but they have the potential to help you clear things early on in the co-op arena. So that's what we've been having with all these bosses, right? Where you go through those series of waves of orc champions and minions, and then you have one of these gargantuan bosses we've had, right? Because now we know some things. We know some things that the bosses aren't affected by. And so if you have an ability where kind of one of the major bonuses to that ability is the effect that it grants, well, they're immune to basically all of those. So, bummer. So let's go ahead and start off. For fighters, so again, 1 is best, 5 is worst. 1 to 5 system, sticking with what I've done in other videos. So, and I'm going to give like what I give to a ranking for each class as we go through it. But true to the, staying consistent, the point of this is not to take forever. So here we go. Going alphabetically, right? So I don't like leak, what my rankings are. Aragorn, as for clearing scenarios, he does have an AoE move. And it has the same issue as Talion's, where it can put him in a position where he's now vulnerable, right? If he doesn't kill these minions, he now becomes the closest person to them, which makes them the target unless a tank's taunt is active, right? Because proximity is what determines how these auto enemies determine their targets. But it does do great damage. Second ability heals, right? So he has great self-healing, because with a damage doer that doesn't have great dodge stats, doesn't have great ability defense or armor, his best way to help himself out is going to be able to keep his damage up by using his high damage to regenerate. So his third ability also grant him some lifesteal, right? And his second ability heals a flat amount. So that's real. Fighters and assassins are the two most vulnerable characters because they're melee and they have basically no real defense stats, with a few exceptions, kind of like Eltariel. But even she's not that stat, because I'll get into that. But anyway, so Aragorn, 2 for clearing scenarios, just because his first ability can't expose him, puts it so that either limits you to when you can use it, or he's going to take more damage whenever he does use it, unless you've set it up. And even then, now you've kind of have this restricted first ability that you can't use on cooldown, which that's the most effective way. If the first thing you can do after you get your ability up is use the ability, that means every auto attack is going towards filling that meter. Okay, so Cenarion auto, that ability makes him great for auto. Talion is kind of king, as garbage as Talion is. He and one of the characters I'll show you, we'll get there, are like kings of auto. Because Talion has two abilities. Both of his abilities are AoE. Because whenever he is clearing like really low HP targets, then he does get to actually have his primary ability work, which it doesn't generally, because it doesn't do enough damage to continue. Co-op arena, I mean, again, the melee thing hurts him because, with certain, like whenever the fire arena guy, I forget his name, he basically just does flames around him all the time. That obviously puts your melees in a more vulnerable position. But whenever you consider kind of the multi-wave situation, how sometimes you might run like you might split the group if you're being pretty coordinated into twos. I still think I could easily give him a 2 here. But he's certainly a great character. You can see by these, it kind of gives away what some of my rankings are going to be, but Aragorn definitely gets some good numbers here. Eltariel, pretty good damage, relatively good survivability for scenarios. Her first ability does have AoE, so that helps, but the window is not as big as a lot of other AoEs. For example, Talion's has like basically no window. As long as he kills a unit, he will almost certainly teleport to the next unit to kill that one. Whereas Eltariel, if she's, for example, got 2 people on opposite sides of her, it's going to be difficult for the AI to be able to pull off, aiming that so she's hitting more than one person. And even then, you might only get 2 out of it, right? And she used melee. And so going to dodge real quick, dodge is the worst stat to be oriented around because it doesn't affect abilities. And really your main damage you need to be afraid of is coming from these orc champions in the scenarios and from the boss in the arena. So it's like, if you're getting killed by the waves, like you would definitely get killed by the boss at the end. So it's kind of it's a semi-irrelevant thing to have your weakness be like, oh, well, your weakness is against waves. Okay, well, you should be clearing that anyway if you stand a chance of being the boss. So she's melee. The fact that her emphasis on dodge is advantageous, but because you were still vulnerable to the highest damage output windows of it's just not as good as being just tanky. Co-op arena gave her a 3. Because, again, those waves, she's going to survive better than certainly Talion. Aragorn will probably be close. Her second ability will probably make her, if you do have some elf stacking on her passives, because that's where she gets those dodge benefits from, then she'll probably be a little more durable than Aragorn until you hit the boss, at which point Aragorn takes over. Because all those abilities that the boss have are going to go through her dodge, because dodge, it doesn't affect ability damage. Talion, what to say about Talion? His first ability is so bad unless you have him pretty overpowered for that scenario, because it might only be able to, maybe you luck out and you can clear the archer backline or something at the start of a phase of the scenario, which is that's like a great thing. That's awesome. But if you target an archer, because it's totally, at least from what I've been able to observe, it feels totally random on which he doesn't go to the closest target to the one that he just killed, and so it's impossible to really try and your skill can't make it more effective because it's random. And pretty much anything else, if you're fighting something at about the difficulty level that of Talion's gear and level and all that, you're gonna get one stronger hit off on one character, and that's it. His second ability does blind, which can help with survivability. But he just has abysmal defense. And that first ability also exposes him whenever he doesn't kill stuff. So for wave clear, he's like, sorry, for like running easy, stuff that's easy on auto, where you're just wanting to kind of milk the most of your energy and get experience while you're, instead of running sims, we've been running simulations, which I think that's called rating. Then he's great, but other than that, he's a really bad choice in almost every single way. He's really accessible. You get lots of shards for him. There are lots of, you get him from hard modes, from Whirler missions. But other than being kind of one of the couple auto kings, he's really bad. So for our rankings, I definitely put Aragorn at the top for this crew. Whenever I don't weigh the scenarios on auto as heavily into these rankings, so you might see someone who has like those numbers add up to something smaller than someone else, but I put that person with the higher score in is because these two things are the most important. Running on autos, it doesn't make that big of a difference. So Aragorn, Eltariel, and then Talion. Alrighty, next going into again, this is alphabetical at first, right? So we've got our 4 ranged units, right? The ranged class, I just copied it down. So first, Arwen. Oh my gosh, Arwen. Arwen is so freaking good. She is the other, she is the other auto king. Queen, in this case. She is fantastic. Her first ability is great for general wave clear, and then her second ability, because it attacks people randomly, but it's a fixed number of instances, it's not hits 4 targets with this ability. It's, no, fires off a fixed number of times to whatever's in range, and if only one character is in range, she's going to hammer that unit, which means that it doesn't become, like more ineffective. Like, for example, Talion's, right? Talion, if there's a group of people around him when he uses his secondary ability, right? The blind, then, like, that's, if there's only one unit there instead, then he's only doing 25% of its total damage output. With Arwen's, because of how it works, which is similar to Legolas's first ability. We'll get into that in a second here, but the second ability damage scales against single target, even though it's like possibly an AoE ability too. There's basically nothing wrong with Arwen. I mean, there's some obvious things that I don't put down as cons list. Like, I'm not gonna put Squishy on one of these like marksmen, because like you expect them to be squishy. I'm not just gonna write down squishy. I did write down melee, I think, on all the melee characters, just to differentiate, particularly on the supports where, maybe you're just not like consciously thinking about the fact that some of the supports are melee and some of them are ranged, but every other one, anyway, let's keep going. Killer Brimborn. Oh yeah, just I mean, I didn't go too much. Literally, Arwen is, I mean, I'm ruining it, but Arwen's clearly the best range character. The main thing, and I forgot to put this con on there, she's incredibly inaccessible. Right, she's pretty much only on Warlord missions, or unless you got her through some of these packs and stuff. She's very difficult to max out, and so her kit may at some point be limited by just the math of, but she's only 4 stars, and I have all these 7-star characters, so even, Talion, right, might become more effective than Arwen, just because, bigger numbers mean bigger damage, and in case you didn't watch like one of the other videos, you don't remember, the reason why melee characters are worse overall, assuming they have the same damage output, like potential same stats, right? Same damage stats, same damage multipliers as a melee equivalent, because a ranged unit may not have to move, is less likely to need to move whenever they're changing targets. Or for example, if Boromir does his horn, right, which makes the enemy move, that's going to hurt a melee character's damage per second, because he now has to move within range in order to hit them. Whereas as long as they remain in the ranged character's range, then they're going to be able to maintain that damage output the whole time. They're not going to have any lost DPS due to needing to move. And they're also more vulnerable, right? Because if a tank's not taunting, a melee character is in the same proximity as the tank, and so it may pull aggro off the tank if it's not taunting. Whereas a range unit, unless you have like the spearmen, right, who target the back line, they're not going to pull aggro, and even that's just kind of something where melee and ranged are equal with regard to the spearman, because the spearman could just as easily, if you have a bunch of like melee fighters, it's going to choose one of your melee fighters, and odds are it's not your tank. Okay. Remember that Celebrimbor, particularly good at single target damage on bosses. That's great. The main thing is that first ability requires a rare ally, right? You've got to have one of the two characters that can make fire happen, right? The burning, and requires like a lot of coordination. Like they both have to have the ability open. You've got to use it in a window where like a group stun is like beneficial, and so it's like it just requires a lot of coordination to really maximize, and all that to not impact the arena bosses because they can't be stunned, obviously. And then the group bonus, a passive, applies to really few FTP characters, which FTP is free to play. Sometimes they do F2P, the same thing. So I give him a 2 on clearing scenarios. He is actually pretty good for that. He's decent for the scenarios on auto for one specific reason. When I use my Celebrimbor, and I'll run, like the lower, like the first scenarios, like Orcs missions, the champions ones, like farm Orcs and for glory and for Grog. Whenever he walks into the boss stage, he just pops his secondary, which a lot of times will one-shot him. So that actually helps speed it up a lot. But he doesn't really help you speed things up until then. So I could have given him like a 2 there, but and then for the arena, he's ranged, single target damage, where kind of the damage bonuses that he get, again, other than like the fire, the burning, coordination, other than that bonus, like his secondary ability like still works full on because it's like damage output, it's not an effect. So that still works against the arena bosses, so he maintains all of his effectiveness there. Okay, Gorvin, right? He's kind of like the redheaded stepchild in this one. Relatively good single target damage, but I hate abilities that force you to essentially like do something wrong in order to benefit from it. Obviously, he doesn't need a huge HP pool in order to be effective, so long as you have other units able to keep aggro and you're able to clear the back line if there are some spearmen faster than they can kill you. So it is beneficial for him to lose HP, but then you have to like find a way to move him in range so that he is doing that, and at that point he's not doing damage because he's moving, and also spoiler, I don't love Torvin either, and so Gimli's definitely the best dwarf, and that's the only person his group bonus is going to apply to that you would want to use, and you kind of don't really want to use Gorvin either. So his group bonus, his 4th ability, doesn't really do much, and his 2nd ability, just like doesn't impact arena bosses, so give him these scores. Since he's only single target, no AoE, he doesn't really help you on auto. Legolas, we've talked about him a little bit already. That first ability has AoE potential, right? It can do AoE, so if you're running those scenarios on auto, right, then it's going to turn into an AoE move, a multi-target move, but it's still, if there's only one target, you only have the Orc champion at the end, you only have the arena boss, then he's going to put all that damage towards a single target. It doesn't reduce the effectiveness of the ability. Main problem, again, like the only dwarf you really want to use is Gimli, and he's not that accessible, and so I didn't put this on Legolas either, but he's also a difficult to max out character for free to play, or dolphins, relatively free to play. So I gave him 2s, and again, it's probably pretty easy to figure out here, but my rankings are, I'm not factoring in the accessibility too much. It's more of kind of like a tiebreaker. So if I have 2 characters that are pretty similar, and then one of them's like way more accessible than the other, but Celebrimbor and Legolas are relatively similarly like accessible, and um, Gorman's the most accessible, great, but it's like it doesn't make him a good character. You can have characters that are super accessible, but if I don't want to use them, that's an irrelevant benefit. So Arwen, Legolas, Celebrimbor, Gorvin. Arwen is awesome sauce. Okay, moving on to supports. It's one of the longer ones. Stick with me. All right, Castamere. In fact, we're going to cut this into 2 videos. Castamere, we have, I gave him a 2 in clearing scenarios because his first ability can be the best single target heal in the game, right? So his shield can mitigate if you know an enemy does enough damage to be in excess of the shield, then you've mitigated a ton of damage, single target. Also, that character is healing themselves while the shield is active. So even if it doesn't get completely gotten rid of, well, that just means that character was healing themselves the whole time, which is, you definitely need to have that unit taking damage in order for this to be an effective ability. But if you throw this on your tank, like I throw this on my Baronor all the time, and it runs out, so that means I've saved him like 20k damage. I forget how quickly that scales, but it's best single target heal, and I kind of like heal in quotes, right? Because it's not a heal, it's a shield, but. However, he does not have as good of defense as you would think. If he's this kind of like healer support, but he's melee and he's not doesn't do that much damage, you expect him to have better defense than he has. He has better than like Lady Marwan, but it's not. You would just kind of expect that kind of character to have a little better defense than he does. So he is definitely a one-trick pony of helps keep your guys up, but he does it pretty well. You don't lose any of his effectiveness in the arena. He has lots of good synergy. So you definitely don't want him for your auto runs because neither of his abilities do damage. So like no, like ranged damage like Celebrimbor, where he can pop the orc from like as soon as you enter the scene, and no AoE clear waves. He's possibly the worst character for auto runs if you are actually running those. All right, Elrond. I was super keen on Elrond when I first saw him. He seemed super OP, even if he wasn't very accessible. But as I kind of like figured him out more, I'm like, actually, he's good, but he's not crazy good. He heals all allies on his basic whenever you have his third ability unlocked, so that's great. It's obviously something that still works in the arena. His second ability boosts first ability generation for the team, so I'll talk about this with Halas. I haven't played the platform game because I'm waiting for it to go on like a major like Steam sale, and that's when I'm gonna get it. Just being real, I have enough stuff to play. I can wait. Doesn't hurt me any. So they both, whenever you boost the attack speeds, like in Castamere does this too. When you boost the attack speeds, it helps fill up that meter faster. So that's obviously super helpful. If you're gonna get the most out of his heal, you have to be one, facing an enemy that can apply debuffs to you. If you're not facing an enemy that can apply debuffs, his heal is really not as effective. And it will require pretty good timing. Yeah, it's kind of one of those things again where like Gorvin, if I've done things correctly, not many of my characters should have debuffs. The main place Elrond is going to be useful is in high level PvP, because one, you're going to actually have him because you're not free to play, you're pay to play, pay to win, whatever you want to call it. Not a hater. You guys pay for the game. I don't hate. You'll be good because you are going to be going up against two other characters we'll get into later who are also like you have to pay for these characters that apply a pretty brutal PvP debuff. And this can cleanse that, assuming that you can have it ready to use and you can kind of wait until some of your guys get cursed. That's the main place he's going to be effective because that's going to allow you to, again, you're waiting until they have their ability up and it's used so that your units have also taken some damage, so it'll actually be some HP to heal back. So Elrond's kind of a counter to those two characters. I haven't left the like PvP thing there because we just don't know what it is yet, and until then I'm not gonna go into that too much. I'm not gonna over speculate. So, and not a very good auto character because again his abilities don't provide much AoE or anything. And he's melee, you know, it makes him more vulnerable. Okay, Halas, and again, I'm probably butchering that. But Halas, his first ability like provides like first ability generates for the team. It heals. That's all great. Main thing is that his healing output is really not enough to sustain a team. Definitely through arena, but then even through again like kind of like at difficulty based on your gear and level like scenarios when you're first clearing them, it's really not enough. And yeah, and I push the envelope a bit. I can generally do scenarios that have where the enemy power is about 50% higher than my team. I can pretty much always clear that. So in that scenario, his healing output is not significant enough. It is great because you can use it on cooldown. You know, because assuming you're popping your other character's abilities, then you basically you just want to use it on cooldown. You want to boost the attack speed to fill up all the meters more to get out the heals. Since his heals aren't that great, you're going to be using his heal pretty much on cooldown, at least for your tank. Simple character to use. So co-op arena, him with another healer like a Castamir or a Lady Marwyn is great. But if he's your only healer, that could be difficult if you're doing more challenging arena content. And I would kind of give him a lower one. So I am kind of counting that as a don't just use him as a healer, though. Don't count on that. Lady Marwyn, she's definitely one of the ones I'm a sucker for. Super, super efficient heal as long as you're able to hit everyone, but has such a big hitbox that really only in arena are you not going to be able to heal everyone. The stun, and obviously doesn't affect the arena boss, but it helps reduce damage in the scenarios because unless it's an unstoppable orc champion, you've now eliminated damage from that unit. One of the most accessible characters, going to put like very accessible FTP character, and the main con is like her stun doesn't apply to arena bosses. I still give her a 1 in arena though. I think she's the best support for arena. And all right. Yeah, again, for clearing scenarios on audio, it's like, yeah, she does have one ability that allows her to do more damage, but she has no AoE potential, so you have better options. Boom. Rat bag. The main thing, if he's just so squishy. He's so squishy. He's one of the squishiest characters in the game. And that really impacts his effectiveness. If he was, and like he should be squishy, if you kind of like think the game and you think kind of what kind of character he is, he should be squishy. But since he's melee and squishy, it really impacts his ability to be effective. His 2 abilities stack damage amplification, right? So he applies, what some games call a brand, right? With his second ability, all damage output is increased by a certain percent, I think it's like 15%. And then his other ability, right, reduces ability, defense, and armor. So now you have more damage getting through that is being having a multiplier added to it. So that's great. He's just so stinking squishy, and his fourth ability, the synergy opportunities there, are very limited for FTP characters or for players. Tower of Sauron, great AoE damage, and it's like self-sustain because he's support. They don't give him, frankly, as much defense as he probably deserves to have. So giving him some sustain is great. He has no healing though, so he's a support character, but you do not have a healer. So you've used up a support slot, and there are maybe not super accessible alternatives, but there are better damage alternatives than Tower of Sauron. So if he's not, it's just kind of weird to fill up a slot with him, like fill up one of your 4 spots, and yet he's not able to heal. And they're more damage-oriented characters that can put out more damage in his stead. So we've gone over everyone. Again, I'm going to break up the other classes to another video just so it'll be easier to sift through for everyone. Don't have some crazy long video. But I put Lady Marwen at the top. Again, I'm primarily considering clearing stuff for the clearing scenarios for the first time, and then arena. I put Castamere second, Elrond or Halas third, Elrond, and frankly, this crew is kind of close, but Lady Marwen to me is like definitely best for arena. Castamere is more advantageous towards scenarios, but like is also kind of limited because his heal isn't that significant. So he's more single target. It's kind of what's your need. Are you gonna need lots of group healing? Lady Marwen's definitely better. Do you essentially have Castamere and Baranor up front, and you're able to kind of micromanage Castamere so that he's not taking that much damage, and then you have a backline? Like, Castamere might be a better option for you. It's going to be easier for Lady Marwen to be a better option for you. Halas, Elrond, Tower of Sauron, and then Ratbag. He's just so stinking squishy. And again, against like DPS orc champions, reducing the armor doesn't help you that much because they don't have that much armor. It is a flat rate, so that's something, but they're just already squishy. You might at some point be overkill. So yeah. All right, guys. So I'm gonna do part B. Read up these other 3 just so it's easy to search. Oh, I want to find the fighters, range, and support. I'm curious about those, and you're not. Anyway, see you in a few.